hear you.
All right. Can somebody unmute and respond if you can hear me?
I can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. I guess I'm not sharing my screen, though. I'm recording, but not sharing, so let me go ahead and do that as well. Bless you. All right. So I'm here to talk about bamboo specs. I think somebody did one talk before, and that was a great starter and initial test of the bamboo specs. Got us excited, and because I think Jim and I and others looked at it last year, the year a while back, and it was not quite there. But when Nate came back to it, it's pretty up to date, and there's a lot of good features, and it's prime time and ready to go. So we've been using it now in a lot of projects. So I'll show some of those, but I'll start off by doing a bamboo specs demo. I created a repo that everyone will have access to with sample application and sample bamboo specs. I've also been working to update the documentation in here, but I have not entirely gotten through that, so it's only a starter. So I've got in here links to latest docs. I know it's not necessarily best practice, but there's a specific version that's out there, and what I didn't want to have to keep the source control up to date with what's deployed. We're pretty darn close. Faisal, who's here in the room, keeps that up to date. So right now this is pointing at latest is pointing at 6.10, and I think we're on 6.9. So. There's just some information here. What is configuration as code? So Bamboo Specs, if you're not familiar with it, it allows you to have configuration as code. All of your build and deployment tasks, jobs, everything is now part of your source control. So some of the advantages of this include automation and standardization, versioning of changes, which actually is tricky when you talk about your Bamboo Specs. It's it's the horse before the carriage. You want to make changes to your Bamboo, to your plan, but you have to merge that into. In this case, Bamboo doesn't support Bamboo specs and branches yet. There's ways to kind of do that. You can create separate plan branches for it, but there's some catches to all of that. So it works with one branch. Typically, that's going to be your master branch. Traceability of changes. So right now, if somebody has access to edit your build or deploy, they can make a change. And you might see, I think, like I don't even remember if it tracks the change, but there's no rollback. There's no diff to it like there is in the wiki or in Git itself. So by having this in having your build specs in source control, you have all of that tracking. You know who did what. You know what changes were made, and you can revert back if you need to. Let's see, smooth promotion of changes from test to production. So I'm going to show you. Yeah.
Are you sharing? I'm not seeing the shared screen. I don't know if it's just me though.
An orange border. Anyone else not able to see it on the call?
I see it here. Okay. It may just be. I'm going to disconnect for a try. Sorry about that.
No problem. So the smooth promotion of changes from test to production in the demo that I'm going to show and some of the sample other applications, we are using the same tasks, the same scripts that we would do for one environment for the other environments. So I'll show you some of the best practices that we've learned for doing that. Keeping the build environment in sync with a product. Again, this goes to you're making a change, and if you're adding a new variable or something else to it, you're doing that in line with your code. So if you need to make build changes for some new feature, you're doing it with the same release, so you can have that merge and deploy in line. Again, there's some caveats there. When you merge it, let's say if you have a pipeline and you have changes that your deployment's queued up, your deployment might affect your prod deployment as well. So if you had a prod deploy that didn't have that change in there, just know that there could be some nuances of timing. So you just have to be kind of cognizant of that. And you're going to get that anyway, even if your CI/CD is not in your source control. So keeping the coding assistance and validation. This I grabbed from their page. Not sure.
Like a mentor or something?
Like a yeah. Maybe that's what they mean for YAML linting. And I mean it's YAML, so
Oh, yeah.
maybe they had this in there because before YAML specs they had Java specs, and so maybe that's what they meant by the coding assistance validation. Anyway, this is my first test at reading the documentation linked together. So I got this started. I don't know if it's some of the best practices. I'm still kind of new to what would be the best practice for some of this, but I got some links going on in here in my documentation. So next steps is talking about the Bamboo specs setup. So you're pretty free to do whatever you want with your Bamboo specs, but the core of it is that you have a folder called Bamboo specs in the root of your repository, and in there you have a file called bamboo.yaml. Those are your requirements, and after that you're kind of on your own to how you want to organize it. So something I think Nate, you kind of initiated this, and I think this has worked well. So just keeping your Bamboo YAML, plain vanilla and dumbed down, like just linking to the other files. So one of the practices we've done is having a folder for your build configuration and a folder for your deployment configuration. So what the Bamboo YAML ends up looking like, and this is my practice, and I appreciate it because I always have a hard time Googling for the docs link. So including the docs link in your files everywhere is just a nice handy thing to have there. But otherwise, you run includes. So each of these references an additional file, and the 3 dashes is there for their separators. So I'll show examples of each of these, but you have your plan. These are build plans, build permission, deployment plan, and deployment plan permissions. All right. So setting up the build. So where do you get started, right? Setting up the build. For a lot of you, you're going to want to go about this following this example where you have an existing build already. You already have a project, and you now want to set up specs, a Bamboo specs for your project. What I do not recommend is do not overwrite your existing build. You're gonna get yourself stuck, and until you get your specs worked out. As soon as you convert your build to a specs build, it gets blown away. So anything you had in there, you can no longer reference. So I recommend going the route of creating a new build plan. And I have some pro tips down at the end, so I'll cover. Create a new build plan and just give it a name, same name if you want, but append it with specs. So we've done that for Groot and Global Search and a couple others. So you'll see build plans in there. And if I show you real fast.
So the goal here is to just create a skeleton kind of YAML. Is that what the goal is?
So in here, I'm going to go through all of this. So yeah. But what I was recommending about the plans is, so you can see here I have a global search service. This is our original build, and then I created a specs build, parallel to that, and we've transitioned to that. We just finished deployment of it about a month ago, so that's what.
Both are using the same repos in BitBucket, right?
Both are using the same repos. One of them is Bamboo spec, and one of them is not. Yeah. So now I've now since disabled. You can see here that it's disabled. I've disabled the old plan, and we've switched over. So that was our cutover. After a couple of weeks, I'll remove, delete this plan entirely, and that's what we did with the Groot data service. But by doing plans side by side, it allows you to reference your old plan if you need to for any reason. So just a recommendation.
Is that one configured to not run tests, or does it says no test found? There are 119.
I think it's because the last change here is kind of it's tricky. This is not a build. This is a specs execution. If I go in here and actually look at the last build that was run, you can see the tests that were run. So. Yeah, there's a little icon that's a document, and that represents the specs importation. And
The difference here, the manual run with the spec automated.
it's not a run. It's the specs were imported. That's what that says there. Their specs execution was successful. It should say like specs import execution was successful. That's where it takes it pulls your repository. It sees there's a diff in the Bamboo specs, and now it updates the build plans or deploy plans, etc.
So does that happen periodically, or does it happen when the build is about to run prior to that?
The specs updates is they're pretty immediate. You can push a change, and that'll get triggered within seconds. You'll see our results. So yeah, creating a build plan. Everyone, if you have access and permissions, you know where it's at. It's that create button up there. You create plan. So I don't know why it's not create build plan, but there's a create deployment project. But that's when you say create plan, that's creating a build plan. And so there's two things that need to be done, and I go into more details on the create plan. But it's not so much that you just create a plan. You now need to also set it up as a spec repository, and I got some screenshots that kind of document that as well. So creating the build plan. When you create the build plan, it's important that the name and key match what you're going to have in your plan YAML. So we'll see that. But in this case here, I'm using our general API project, and then I'm giving it a plan name, and then a plan key. I've defined the plan key. I think it'll give you like a plan key just based off like it would have done BSD. This one I just went ahead and did Bamboo specs for clarity. Here you're going to either, if you're converting a project, you might already have a linked repository, so you can use that if you have that. In my case here, I was set up a new one, so I was setting this up new, and so I select new, Bitbucket server. Display name you can come back to. I think it auto-populates when you select your server here and your repository. So you find your repository, and I think that this might autofill. Otherwise, you can just, it's best to, I think, follow that convention where it's the project key and then the repo name. And then here, you're going to select your branch. I've got a pro tip at the bottom I'll show you is when you're setting this up for the first time, if you have an existing repository and an existing build, you'll probably not want to set master. You probably want to do a branch. And one practice that we've done is just call the branch Bamboo specs. You can keep it long running if you want and kind of utilize that. There's another strategy I'll talk about if there's time at the end here. So if this is new, entirely new, you can set up master. But otherwise, if you have an existing repo and build plan, you probably want to start this in a side project. Otherwise, every time you're pushing your YAML specs, it's going to trigger your other build as well. So that's the point of doing it in a side branch. So then once you've set that up, then you need to set up the specs repository, and that's where you go up to the top here. And I don't know if everyone has access to this. If you do, you just click on the setup the specs repository, and you're going to get this page here, where you will select that you're going to be doing your build project, selecting your build project, and selecting the linked repository that we just either set up or your current one that you already have. Now an example, and this is kind of a dumbed down example of the plan YAML that you would have for your build. And I've got it annotated here. So again, I'm using the project key, I'm using API. All of these are very critical to match. If you have anything mismatched, the Bamboo spec import is going to fail, and I'm not sure if everyone has access to see the error messages. Several of us do. I think myself, Jim, and Nate, and anyone else that has given Faisal $20.
Oh, it's great now.
Price has gone up. We got the entry level. I put some links in here. I guess you can't click the links in the docs here. But you can set up the triggers. So this one's going to poll. This is 180 seconds to 3 minutes. From what I've seen, I don't know about the polling. It looks like it's pretty frequent, so it's not so much. I don't know, if you do come across where your build is not being triggered automatically, I'd be surprised. You can define variables. So this is just an example here. There's a lot of different variable examples, but the documentation is pretty good. There's a nuance for passwords. There's a nuance for the secrets, Bamboo secrets. The password nuance is you have to your variable has to be named password if you want it, if it is to be treated as a password.
Yeah, hide it.
Yeah. Then you're going to define, in your build, you're going to define stages. And so here I've got a stage called build. And then in this build stage, you can actually, I probably should have put this note here, you can name this as well whatever you want. So when you define stages, you define like whatever your stage name you want it to be called. In this case, I'm calling it build. And then it's going to have a job, and here I'm giving it any job name. In this case, you can call it the build job. The important part here is that these names as well must match. So whatever name you give your job here, you need to define it then below. You can give it whatever key you want. Anybody that's running Docker is going to have this requirement in there. And then you define your tasks. And I've got an example that we'll take a look at that. The build plan permissions. This is as well pretty bare bones here, but enough to be representative. You're going to, here you need to make sure, again, all the links matter. So this value that you give here for your plan needs to match the key and plan defined in your build plan just above. So in this, you saw here, I had API for the project key and Bamboo specs for the plan key. So that's where this becomes API-Bamboo specs. And then you can define all your permissions. This is the build plan permissions. So this is where I'm going to define a user or users who can run or view plan configuration. So I've given myself is in the user list, and the permissions I've given myself view, edit, and build. Now because these are Bamboo specs, you cannot edit these in the GUI. So it's really granting me view rights to the configuration. So we'll show that as well. And then this next one here I've defined as the roles and allow all logged in users to view the build plan. Please follow this best practice. Unless there's any secret sauce in your build, any links that people try to click on for the build logs, from a pull request or anything like that, they won't be able to access it unless you add this in there, or unless they have explicit permission to the build. So this is explicitly allowing people to just have view access to the build. And then here's some pro tips I put down here. So when creating new build plans, you must continue to click. Oh yeah, so when you're creating a new build plan, even though there's a Bamboo specs and it feels weird, let me just show an example, because this is a weird little nuance that I don't know if they'll get rid of someday. You come in here to create a build plan, and just test, and it doesn't matter because I'm gonna not click this next button here, but it's like, oh, okay, I don't really want to define this stuff here because I'm gonna set it up as Bamboo specs. So it feels weird. It's like, okay, did it save it? So I click the cancel, and no, the cancel aborted. It didn't really save it. So just if you're creating a new plan, keep clicking, even though you're not really configuring the build there. If you have an existing project, create a, so that's where I was recommending just append it with the specs. And then I talked about a branch practice there of creating a Bamboo specs branch. When you do that,
As soon as you do it, the spec goes up in the button.
when you do a create, yeah, after you click the create button there. So if I click the plan and I clicked that create to continue, then it would have created it. But it just, I don't know, maybe it's just me. No, it's fast. Yeah, maybe it's just me, but it feels weird to to be here on the configure the job, because I don't really want to configure any jobs in the GUI, right?
Right.
I want to do it through the Bamboo specs. So yeah, I'm not going to click create because that's going to map it into that other one. Let me stop there, and I'll show you now what the build looks like when it creates that, and we can do a quick demo of making a change if you want to see how that works. So the build, and everyone has access to view this. You can come in and, well, at least view it, but not to. What the edit gives you is it gives you the right to view the plan configuration. So everyone would otherwise be able to come in here and see the job history, click into these and see the logs on any of those, etc. By having the edit rights, you can now come in here and view. So view the linked repository. So you'll often see in here, I can come in here, I can see all the tasks. If I come in here and try to edit anything, you see the save button's disabled. I think that there's some messaging somewhere. Some pages have messaging that say that it's a Bamboo spec and you can't edit it here. But you can see it's all defined. It has all the tasks. It has requirements. The Docker exists. I have the artifacts definition. So let me. I guess I didn't show the example stack that we're looking at here. Plan, I should say. So this is the full, and a lot of it was the same here of the triggers, the variables. I added a few variables in here. I put in DTR in here in case anybody wants to have this as an example as well as we move toward DTR. Not going to go into details on that. There's a couple other hoops you got to jump through to get DTR working. DTR is the Docker Trusted Registry. Just as a teaser, maybe an upcoming Monday talk. I can. Oh, how did that happen? Oh, okay. That is our service user, correct. So that'll only work for the GUI. It's a GUI service account.
Yeah, okay.
So this is DTR, and there's some GUI spaces, and I think this is what's in here now. I think Jim's getting his hands dirty, so good stuff. But I've got this in here if anybody wants to use this as an example, or incentive to get going there. So I've got the build job, and in the build job here now I've defined more of the tasks that are going to run for this build. So a lot of you are familiar with like a set CI variables that we do. We pipe in our build key and build number, so there's a script that runs that. And then this next line here will take the results of that, which writes a file called CI variables, and it'll set it to the scope result. This makes your CI variable, the CI variables available to all subsequent stages, including deployments for this build. So I don't have to do the inject variables again on any of the deployments by setting the scope to result. And here I'm just setting the namespace as CI variables. I'll show you what that looks like right here, actually. So by setting the scope to CI variables, you can then reference, version equals bamboo.CI variables .version, whatever you had in CI variables there. So yeah, the next step, the next task in here is another script. You can run a pipe here to do a multi-line script. And so here, I'm just doing a Docker compose build. Here I'm just echoing out the user and URL just for login purposes. This next line here is one way. I'm sure there's other ways. But you need to, for DTR, you need to do a Docker login. And so this pipes in a password into the Docker login where you specify the user. And the password is the standard indent, and then the DTR URL. So after you do the Docker login, then you can run the Docker push, the Docker compose push, and then you need to run the Docker logout. Then you can specify final tasks. Here I'm just doing a standard Docker compose down and then removing the locals. And lastly, capturing a couple of artifacts. So even though even though I'm capturing or making the CI variables available in the full scope of the build, I still like my preference is still to capture it as an artifact. Allows you to go into any release or any build and see the variables that were generated from that. So, and the Docker stack, of course, everyone's familiar with your stack file. This just makes it available so that on your deployment, you don't have to do a git checkout. This is all you need for your deployment now, is your stack YAML. So that's the build plan, and then the build permissions. I think this was what I had in the documentation was almost the exact same. So no changes in that. So when you're looking at the Bamboo specs and the configuration for that, now this is why these are here. They're set as required because I marked them as required in the YAML. All of the tasks, you saw those. There was a clean, a code checkout. I think the code checkout comes as a default in Bamboo. As far as Bamboo specs, I don't think that's anything you can change. And then you saw my scripts here for running the set CI variables. Don't have to do anything special here. You saw the next task was injecting the variables. You can see that's setting the scope. Everything's exactly as I have it in the code, including the scripts, which looks like you can edit. You cannot. No, I said it looks like you can edit, but you. So that's the build. Excuse me. Yes, we have this issue, and I'm hoping that they support it at some point. I know what you've reached out about, and Faisal's asking a question about. Some folks run into an issue where your branch gets caught in a endless cycle of not being able to build because the directory is not clean, and
that's due to some Docker type builds use root as creating directories and files, and Bamboo user is running your build doesn't have the
right. And so Bamboo YAML spec does not support this option yet, but I'm hoping at some point it will, because this is what would automatically clean up your working directory after each build. So yeah, in the documentation, if I have the documentation open still. It's in there. It's one of the options there, but maybe it's supported in the Java spec, but in the Bamboo spec, what was the field again? Clean.
If we have Alfonso that's enough somehow we are okay.
This is.
The next Bamboo upgrade will look for a fix.
Yeah. The first one you see up here, this is the pre-clean, and so we do the cleanup above, but as a first task, but that doesn't do it after the build, and so it's still there. So I don't know why the clean won't work. But. Exactly. That's the catch there. Okay, so I showed the build plan, I guess before I move on to the deployment, any questions on the build right now?
Okay, you create everything on the spec. Nothing is created from the Bamboo GUI, right?
Correct.
Nothing. So you just create your YAML and then push it up in Bitbucket and it shows up in the Bamboo.
Right. Yeah, I can. We can make a quick change to something to see what you might want to do. So this is plan. So let me collapse that. So look at the build. And let's say who wants to have the view rights on here? Nate, I'll grant you. Or Jim's got his laptop in here. If you. Uh, well, yeah. I mean, you could if you weren't ready with your deploy, you just either comment those lines out or remove it, and you can just work with your build. Then you don't need all the deployments and everything like that.
You will have permissions, but for the others,
Mm-hmm.
will they have permissions to run that code?
Yeah, to run it. Yeah, once you move it to to the source, anybody can then. I mean, it's whatever you put in your plan permissions.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm granting now Jim and Nate access to either build or view the plan configuration. So let me go ahead and I'll push this, and I'm back over in. I have the build open. You should see this updated, immediately 6 seconds ago. So I couldn't even get here in time. It updated already, and there's really not much to this build. So it already built as well. And now if I wanted to double check that, I can now see the plan configuration and the permissions. And now you can see they're both in here added with the build and view rights. And you can see down here as well the logged in users permission. I don't know if the specs gives you, no, it does not. I don't think it gives you details of what it did. Just that it was successfully imported. You will often, I don't know if failed. No, that's not pretty. I was going to see if just show you the logs of what it might look like on the failed. Oh, I could screw up something and we could see a failure. Add a tab. Dir. Okay, so we'll save that. Really? It likes dir? Okay. I thought that would fail. Usually, that should fail. What? You think that's okay? Like, okay, yeah. All right, there you go. So yeah, I think you should be able to, if you're setting this up, you're going to run into this. Okay, so this gives you some information here. So yeah, it failed. The tab there. It didn't tell me anything about the other one, but sometimes you'll see if you don't have the names correct, then it says you can't. Your plan doesn't have permission to create the deploy plan or create the plan, etc. But yeah, you can see here how fast it is. The specs configuration. It's already updated and it's building right now, so it's fast. Okay, so the deployment now. Jump back into the decks. Deployment. So deployment is similar. You're going to need to create in this case, it's a deployment project instead of calling it a plan. And then after you've created the deployment project, then you need to go back into the same menu option, the set up the specs repository, and go through that. So setting up or creating the deployment project, this name that you give here has to match what you put in your YAML. And then you just select your build plan that it references. You can, I would suggest using the same main plan branch, unless you have any reasons to have different environments on different branches. So then after you've created that, then you're going to set up your specs repository. I think Nate, I told you before that you had to, when you were creating your plan branch, that you had to go into the linked, like set the repository as a linked repository, I've verified you do not have to do that extra step. So it's good. So yeah, but you do have to come in to set up the specs repository now. So previously we did it for the build project. Now we're going to do it for the deployment project. And so I'm going to select this new project I just created. And I'm going to link it to the previously linked repository that was created when we did the build project. And that's it. So now I mean, that's all you have to do with it. Now it's entirely the YAML. I didn't finish putting the documentation in here for the YAML, but I'll walk through this and what we have set up for the deployments. So yeah, you can see here, maybe it's hard to read, but I can't zoom in. The menu, yeah, the menu does zoom in. Okay. So you can see you got your Bamboo specs, your Bamboo YAML. We went through the build, and now I've got a folder for the direct deployments. In here, I've got the similar plan YAML and plan permissions. They are a little bit different, the plan permissions and the plan YAML here. So now this has to match the name that you've put into when you created your deployment plan. I'll put a note in there. And then your source plan must match. This is where I've made this mistake a couple of times now, and I feel like it's beyond a rookie mistake. It's just it's a nuance. You have to know that the source plan has to be in that project key and plan key format. And then some of the things I've put in here, I put in the release naming, so this is going to automatically name your releases for you. If you have any triggered deployments, that you have to have something in place. And then the environments, you can name your environments whatever you want. So this is just an example here. I've defined 2 environments. This is what's going to show up as far as your build plans. They're build environments really. And I've got another couple other builds I'll show you that use a different strategy. But for the most part, most people will be using integration stage, etc. as their environments or their plan names. And then to keep things organized, these just reference external files. And I've organized this out where I've put these into the deployment environments. So deployment environments, you can see here I've got 2 files in here. So integration and production. And here I've got a few other required fields, or a few other externally referenced YAML files. Most of these I've put now under the deployment shared, so I've got some shared files. And the reason I did that is if you get a lot of environments, a lot of things are going to be the same in each environment, except for 2 things: your variables and if you have triggers or not. Ideally, your tasks should be the same, and this is where one of the advantages I described is if your tasks are different for different environments, you're not really testing your full process each time. By making sure your tasks are the same for each environment, the only thing now you're testing is the variables, right? So that's important as you go to production. Otherwise, you need to have a different plan than to go into production than you do for any other environment. And this is not something that you could have done with the Bamboo UI, right? You can't share things in your deployments. You can clone the deployment plans, but then you go in there and you edit each one manually. All right, so requirements is shared. I'll show you that. The notifications shared. The variables here, I've just defined several different variables. A lot of these are familiar. Well, a couple of these are familiar. We have our Docker command options. I've gotten in the practice of moving this to the front, the name, so I know exactly which one it is. Otherwise, you have to scroll all the way to the end to see which one it is. The rest of these are going to be in the stack YAML. I can show that right now. So we've got a subdomain. This is all for the traffic labels. A Docker env, being either dev or prod, and then our network env, which is our swarm environments, whether it's UII or UIZ. And then I think I had the traffic net in there. So for folks that know or have already been moving over to the new traffic net networks, this kind of shows that as well. So go back over here. So this is specifying the traffic net int, because this is going to be our int environment here. So this deploy does have a triggered a trigger on it for the stage success of build. This goes back to our build plan here, where I had a stage called build. So that stage success build, your keys are going to have to line up. So if you name it something other than build, and if you want to have a trigger on it, you got to make sure you align that as well. So let's see. Correct. So the stage is not an environment. This is a stage, a build stage success. And, yeah. So then the production YAML, looking between these two, they're they're the same except for the variable. So the production is dropping the int. It's now going to use TrafficNet PRD, UII still, and Docker env is PRD. And then the Docker command options now is going to go against UII 00p. The tasks are still shared. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at some of the shared. So the first one is the requirements. That didn't really share much, but it's still something that can be abstracted out. So I'm sharing the requirements. Everything's requiring Docker. The notifications. So if you wanted to have anything different here, if you wanted to have different environments, have different notification schemes, you could, but not through the shared practice. But for the most part, I have everything the same. And then, I copied this over from another project. I guess I don't have any shared triggers here, so that's not used. But the shared tasks here. So this is for the deployment. And so the first one is clean. I don't know if that's required on the deployments. It's always good to start clean, so best to just put that in there. The artifact download, this is where it's going to grab your Docker stack YAML that we've set as an artifact. And then we're going to... Yeah.
So yeah, you need it because the deployment plan works on the Bamboo server, Bamboo remote build server. It checks out a Git repository and it creates a workspace. So if you don't do a clean, it will still have the old.
This is on the deploy and it doesn't do a Git checkout, so.
But the workspace is still there.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, that's true.
That's what it's going to do.
Got it. So then, so the artifact download gets the stack YAML, and it's going to run the Docker stack deploy. So I guess in here, so I'm just, you just always have to remember to export your variables if they're going to be used. This is kind of like, if you're familiar with the old practice of going into the build, and let me go look at something real fast, because I think everyone has gone through this, and it's real tedious in the UI. Minder API. So I'll go ahead and look at, I guess, any one of these. Go over here and edit the task. And so you're familiar with when you had to run like your Docker stack deploy, you had to go through and add all your environment variables. This is essentially the same thing. This is exporting them to make them available when you're running these commands above. So whatever you did in your environment variables here, you just now need to call out and put on a line as an export statement. So
I love it. It saves our time.
And then, so now you're running your Docker with your command options. The command options is now executing this on the remote Docker swarm, the targeted swarm, running a Docker stack deploy, piping in your whatever your stack YAML is, and then your stack name. So this is what's deploying there. I guess the last thing to kind of cover before showing some of what it presents or creates is the plan permissions. And this is actually really cool because this is what allows the different environments to have all the permissions and the production to be set up for the change control team. So there's deployment permissions, and these permissions apply to the deployment project. Again, just follow the friendly practice. Everyone has view access, and then again, edit is not truly edit; it's just viewing the configuration. So you can grant users to on your team to have the edit rights, even though it's not really edit, but just give everyone else view rights. This is going to allow everyone to click in and click through to everything.
What would happen if you didn't include the edit code?
Then I would not be able to see the configuration. So here I'm looking at this configuration, right? That's what you wouldn't be able to see. So if I go back to the specs here, and if everyone's not familiar, I don't know when this was added. I think it was sometime in the fall or something with one of the Bamboo updates, but it used to be, a tedious task of like navigating and finding your deployment plan. Everything is nicely linked now. So along with all the other links, you have a deployment links here, and this now links your deployment project to your build project. So I have my integration and production that were defined there. So if I didn't have the edit right, I wouldn't have that cool pencil next to it, which wouldn't allow me to see this page and see the tasks or any of these other things. You would just see, I think, the logs. Is this the deployment? I think it just took me back. Otherwise, I would only be able to go into I'd be able to see this environment. I'd see view rights gets you to this page where you can see the history of the environments. I think I can see, so I could see the project with the summary here of the environments, what's deployed to each, and then I can go into each one of the environments and see the history of which versions were deployed, click on any of the logs, etc. So it's all the view Fs. Oh, and I don't think, because I have, this is integration, so I have deploy rights as well. That's why I can see the rollback option, as well as the deploy up here. But notice how production isn't there, right? So here's where this is really cool. I'm really happy the way that Bamboo implemented this in their specs. So this is the project level. This doesn't get you access to any of the environments though. So the next one is the default environment permissions. It's saying, like, regardless of which environment it is, this user, Ryan Jones, is going to have all of these rights, and everyone else has view rights, except, now I'm going to create an environment-specific permission, except for production. Now, anything I don't include here is now, it's not like a cascade. The default is not like a cascade, so it's not granting all of this now to production. This is like, these are more like exceptions here. So production does not use the default configuration. It has this own configuration. And this is giving the app bitbucket appmon right group, which is a mouthful.
So environment permissions is basically overriding the default.
Right, exactly. So you don't have to, like, you can give everyone, everyone on your team access to deploy, but then you say accept production, and now this appmon bitbucket right, this group here is the change control team. This is their group, and so they have rights to view and deploy. They don't have. I guess it doesn't hurt to give them edit rights because they technically don't have edit rights. It's just, it's been a practice that they don't. It's an extra thing that they don't need. Otherwise, everyone still has. Again, you want everyone to be able to see the logs and the environment. So when I go back here, I can see production, but I can't deploy it. So like there, I can do the deploy. And then if I, I guess it was never deployed yet, so I can't, look at that. It says I can, aha. Cool. So that's the permissions there. And that's really cool that how they did that, because that's it would have been tricky otherwise. And you don't have that capability or ability to do that otherwise in the legacy way. So if you have edit rights on the deployment project, you can go in there into the production environment and grant yourself deploy rights, sneak a deploy out there, and then remove your permission, and
And then lose your job.
there you go. But with this route, you don't have that. I mean, you'd have to go through the process. I mean, I could push it. You'd have to go through the process of pushing it and going through the build and deploy. It's obviously, and that's going to go through a lot of, more transparency there. So that's the deployment as well. That's
Since you are the admin user on the API project, you should have edit permissions. Because you are admin on the API project. Right.
Yes. So I want to go through a couple of other projects that people can look at for reference, and that's the the global search service spec. Let me show that one, and then the group data service spec. Group data service spec is pretty basic. There's not much to it. It does the build, and then it has a deploy with. I guess there are some additional jobs in here, so to speak. So we have a database refresh, and now we've cloned this now, so we've got a media database refresh and a publisher database refresh. So we have these set up as deployment jobs because they use they're not part of the builds, but they'll be triggered. I guess I clicked into one. So these have configuration here where they have triggers, and so this one's scheduled to run. You can have cron jobs on these. So that's one, and then the global search service. This one has a lot of. Actually, this is one where I could clean this up because this is something I learned. So this has a lot of deployments under this one plan. Let me go to this other project. Got a couple in under the Docker project now. I've got Keep Alive D, Kibana, Portainer, and Traffic. All of these are using the Bamboo specs as well. These all have a little bit different practices in place. I can show you what this is. One that I learned was really cool is when you are defining your deployments, you may come across where you actually want to split your plan, your deployment plan. And I don't know, maybe it might make sense to have like a separate deployment plan for UII than UIZ in some cases. But in this case here, Portainer has a Portainer UI, and then the Portainer agent runs everywhere else. The environments now for this, and this might appear confusing. I can try to explain it. We have a dev instance of Portainer UI and a dev instance of the Portainer agent that we use to test Portainer upgrades, like version upgrades. So they have an agent version and a UI version. And one thing I did is I split this out. So we don't actually build Portainer. So I have it. I think my build for this. Let me see if it does anything. I don't remember. Right. They don't have it documented. They don't have it. You just add more lines. So yeah, they don't have. I don't think it was documented. I think I found somebody said it in like one of their answers or something like that, and it was like, it's like really, yeah. So right. Yes, I know. Yeah. Well, they must support it now, because it shows up in the GUI, right? Like it shows up here like deployments too. It's all handled for. But yeah, so you can name it whatever you want. So they don't have to be called build and deployment. So here I've got it the deploy agent and the deploy UI. It's similar, very similar structure otherwise. But yeah, this allowed me to separate out the environments, because the UI is only deployed to the internal swarms, whereas the agent needs to run on every swarm, including the UIZ. So that's where the UI is deployed to our in fact, we're only currently deploying this to ORD, but I probably should get a DR option in there as well to the UII. But then the agent, yeah, it has every environment. So here's our dev instance that allows us to test the upgrades. But there's a on the same host, we're deploying what we call the prod version. That's because Portainer prod is everyone goes to Portainer is going to this portainer.prd. You're using the prod instance of Portainer. So again, we do have a dev instance that runs in our dev swarm, and we're only deploying the agent currently to the one swarm. That's what we saw in there. So that was cool, splitting that out. And then I think one other thing I wanted to mention. If anyone else wants to kind of, I don't know, it works for me as a best practice, but I don't know for others. Again, I'm not building the agent. I'm just referencing it for our deployments. And so what I've put in here is that the the version that pipes out in here, the 151, that's the Portainer agent version, and the 123.0, that's the UI version. I think I did something similar for traffic. So yeah, traffic we're on 1.7.18, and that's follows this practice of the swarms are the environments. And then our keep alive D just had, yeah, I had that one was also standard to this practice. But yeah, so there's the global search, the group data service, and I think Nate, you got a couple now in there, right, that are using Bamboo specs. And then Jim's got 2 now. So has anyone else tried touching Bamboo specs? I know a few of you are. Oh, cool. I know, Patrick, you've got, I know you guys all got your hands dirty with it. Let's see. So, any questions? Any questions on the builds, deploys, or anything else? Sure. So you saw the one use case that I put in here for DTR, and I glossed over that, and I forgot Nate ran into this recently, and it's, if I don't talk about it, then somebody else is going to stumble on it for a while. So that was in the build. I've got my DTR_password. So that's important. I forgot, just because it was clear to me that I had my DTR user and DTR password. You must have password in the name, otherwise Bamboo will not unencrypt your encrypted password there, or your encrypted secret there. Is it only password, or was there another? Okay. Yeah, let me see if I can find that on. Yeah. So yeah, the password thing, so let's see. Is this under variables? Yeah, here it is. In case of storing passwords and variables, you can use Bamboo Specs encryption, store it in the repository and encrypt it, see the documentation, sensitive data, and yeah, here it is. Yeah, okay. So secret variables are determined by their name to be considered secrets. Blah blah blah. You must include password, passphrase, secret, or SSH key. So it's important to name your variables as such, and then when you're using it. So okay, and then how to do that? That's just right up here. Specs, encryption, and whatever you put up there. You encrypt, it's going to give you a hash of that, and I'm sure it stores it or however it does it. But anyway, there's a secret, so you can now copy that. Bamboo secrets really suck. They should. This is not secure, and I hope it comes up in a future upgrade with Bamboo. I've given a lot of thought to this on like how this could be secure, and give me an option to select my project, my build project, or my plan, and say that's the only scope for this secret. Right now, this is a global secret. And you saw here, I've got this DTR password and the user. If anybody now wants to take this, and please don't, and just like do all the writing that they want, they could from Bamboo. It does restrict it. It means that somebody can't do it, ad hoc from their machine, and where there's no traceability. It will run it through Bamboo. So at least there's traceability now, because it's in a Bamboo secret. So there's one small barrier of, yeah. But yeah, the secrets are shared. They're global secrets. Like there's no scope to them. So that's really what they need. Is they need a build project or a build plan or some kind of way of decreasing the scope of that secret.
The only thing I can think of is if you create a secure repo and you store the secrets in there and then put it as a YAML file.
Yeah. Some of that stuff still gets logged, and I guess we just have to make sure it doesn't get logged out to the the build logs.
Yeah, if you use your variables as password or parachute, then they will be
Oh, okay.
during run they will be stored.
Okay, got it. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone. I will stop the recording. You're free to hit me up for any other questions. And again, everyone should have access to this repo if anyone wants to check it out or if anyone has any other questions.
Okay.